Start this recording. Hi, everyone out in Zoom land. Good to see you. We do not yet have a quorum. 1, 2.
I'm non-voting.
7. Yeah, we do not have a.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 more. We don't have a quorum yet.
Don't have it yet.
But we're glad you're here, Chris.
I'm glad to be here.
No. Almost. Yes, 17. That's.
We need 9.
9.
8.5. We only
Who
have
wants
6.
to volunteer to be the house?
Well, I go because I'm non-voting. I have
6, 7, 8. There we go. Okay. All right.
Ish. Yeah, so go ahead and call the meeting.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. Can you guys hear us out in Zoom world? Good, thank you. I know that last time we did not have great great audio, so apologies for that. So it is 3:02. I am calling the meeting of February 8th to order, and we do have a quorum. And let's move on now to the approval of the agenda. I don't move, someone moved. So moved by Tara, seconded by,
I second.
seconded by Ben. Was that you, Ben? Okay, thank you, Ben. Seconded by Ben.
Yes.
Right, thank you for that. All right, do we have any public comment today? Any public comments? All right, no public comment. That takes us to the approval of the minutes. These are the minutes that were submitted last time. Margarita went and made some changes, taking in the comments from the last Senate meeting. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Ellen?
I looked at the two documents side by side and I didn't see any differences. So I didn't look, word for word, but I looked at each paragraph and they seemed to be the same. So I don't know if there was just an error in which document got uploaded. There's still in the version attached to today's agenda, there was still no nothing about the point of order that was called or the discussion around that.
Okay, all right, so let us, thank you, Ellen, for that. So we will try one more time, third time.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so what we are doing with the minutes is they will come back for the next meeting. All right, so that brings us to our information items. And now we should all look at Trisha because our own Trisha is the FACCC or FAC, Faculty Member of the Year. Yay! Congratulations, Trisha. What do you get for that? What does she get for that?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to be going to Sacramento, I guess, for the conference. My doctor cleared me, so it's okay to go, and into March. So
Great.
Oh, that's excellent.
Great.
get to meet a lot of interesting people, and that's what I'll do.
And get your glass trophy because Cornelia keeps making this hand gesture, right?
Okay.
The National Hand Gesture for Glass Trophy that we've got right there. Okay. Excellent. We're really pleased and well deserved. So, so it's great to celebrate you. The ASCCC plenary. This is so early. It's so early that their website is really pretty much just a splash page. It is 420 through 423. The thing that I would like you to keep in mind is their date for the closing of their block rooms, which is March 20th. So if you're interested and you want to go in person in Anaheim, you want to get to their website before March 20th. And there is money for people to attend. Okay, and I will get more details for you as we get closer to that. You would. All right. Let's see. Let us now go on to the president's report. So, I don't know if you've noticed, but in our last Senate President's Report, I had mentioned that we probably would be needing to talk about AI, and then that following weekend, there was a lot of discussion of AI, so. There is a coordinated response from Justina, Josh, and Rob Brown at the FRC. Various things that are going to happen regarding ChatGPT and academic integrity. And I think this is just going to be an ongoing and a developing. This is something that's obviously happening in real time. And I think that there's been discussion about having a roundtable just for people to talk about it, just to get some ideas out. At some point, we'll probably need to respond to that. So I would imagine that will probably come through the Senate. And I spent a lot of time also making this hand gesture, which is the 2023 hand gesture for murky area, right? And I know it's the.
I think that's more like together.
Yeah, I thought that was
Well,
coming
It
together.
it is together, it's together,
Murky.
it is together in murkiness, right? So I do think that this discussion of AI, ChatGPT, I think this is also connected to discussions of academic freedom. I think there's a lot of places where we will find a kind of synergy, positive or negative, with some of the things that we're discussing this year. So we have that. There's the Ally Retreat on restorative justice. I don't know how many of you have done that, but that is really pretty fabulous. You really get to bond with other people from school. Usually there are amazing speakers there. And this time the topic is restorative justice. There are the Tiro campus workshops, which are still available. And then just to emphasize sort of ongoing things, and I know Ellen is on AP, so she already knows what's coming through there, which is the new language for academic probation will be coming through there. It's going to be shown to them, and it's going to be coming through there. So at some point that will probably be coming to us once it moves from AP. Okay, just a heads up about that. The search for the college superintendent president is still going on, right? Starting to kick into gear. And then I want to end with my plea, the plea. I'm looking around, only one person is looking at me when I say plea. Everyone else, like students, is looking down, suddenly very interested in your keyboards or your phone or whatever. We have an anti-racist hiring pilot, and that is really, really essential to the school and to the future of the school. And it requires a lot of different levels of screening. And I sent out an email twice, and I appreciate every single person who has already said, yes, I am happy to do that, who is willing to do the level 2 screening. And that is the screening for the cluster hire criteria. So if you are at all on the fence about that, please jump in. It will give you a real understanding of what people are bringing to the school. It will help you meet other people. The look-fors are going to be done by Frank Harris and Luke Wood, which, you know, they're excellent. You saw them last Friday. So if there's still some time, so if you're on the fence, and thank you to those who are willing to look me in the eye, the Zoom eye, the few of you, right? If you're on the fence, please consider jumping off the fence into the pool of the level 2 screening.
Would it be okay for me to ask you a question or not?
Yes, you can ask a clarifying question.
Okay, so I think I understood you in my reply that if I'm a chair of a hiring committee, I'm automatically in that
Yes.
cluster hire.
You are already
So
on
I
the
don't
level
have,
2 screening.
I don't have to sign up again.
No, you are already there.
Okay,
Good question.
So the idea is that there will be people from outside and who will be looking at these two specifically for the cluster hiring qualities. And so that is before it goes to the department. Okay. All right. And it is exciting that today we have here, we're going to kick off our presentations today with a presentation from the A4A task force. Melissa Menendez and Ryan Alexander. I have uploaded our, or their new presentation there, and it's in orange, so I made a change to our agenda, so just so you know, that you'll have two on there. The original presentation and the revised presentation. Okay, take it away, Melissa and Ryan. And Margarita, does Melissa have the ability to share? Screen share?
Actually, I'll be sharing.
Yeah, Ryan will be sharing.
Yeah.
1 second.
Multiple.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, Ryan, you should be all set.
Okay, there we go. Okay, can everybody see this all right?
Yes. Perfect, yes, thank you.
All right. There you go. So I think this is our first time presenting at Senate. And so we wanted to give a little bit of context as well as where we're at in our process. So that's why we asked Melanie to come present today. So this is the accreditation standard for a task force, the A4A, as it's kind of been known, or the acronym for it. We basically, do you want to go to the next slide, Ryan, please? Here's the membership. So there have been some folks that have come on, some folks that have come off, but the hardcore bunch has remained. So I've been the Senate faculty representative on this committee and the co-chair since its inception. Ryan was the other co-chair since its inception. And then we've had some of the ALA representation switch and some of the CSEA representation switch up since the last couple of years that we've been a task force. Do you want to go to the next slide, Ryan? So basically why we exist is because the Accreditation Steering Committee proposed that this task force be formed as an oversight in the process of making sure that we met the charges and the revisions that we said we would do. And the specific focus of what we're looking at is the participatory governance structure. So this was first began by Dr. Goswami, and then Dr. Murillo came on board, and then she kind of suggested some other ways that we could do this work. Do you want to go to the next slide, Ryan? So basically our purpose in this, we took a few meetings for us as a group and as a collective to kind of formulate what our purpose was, what our own sort of mission is. And basically based on the task force charge, this is what we came up with, that our main task was to reimagine and restructure what our participatory governance could look like based on the campus climate survey that had been conducted previous years, as well as the information that was developed by the accreditation team. So basically we from there, we sort of thought about what would inform our work. And so mostly what's informing our work is the institutional self-evaluation report that was written by the accreditation group, so that became our template for the work that we're doing. So that we are there as a group to ensure that these steps or this timeline that another group created is actually implemented. If you go to the next slide, Ryan. And then that is the timeline. So do you want to take over now, Ryan?
So since it's been about a year and a half that we've been working on all this, and our first task was to create the diversity, equity, and inclusion group through CPC. So we drafted our proposal, submitted it, and that was accepted. And since that time, we've been it's basically been in the hands of the president's office in the midst of so many different changes. So we're the construction of that group is still in the works, but we essentially fulfilled our portion of that task. For the second action, we went through a series of drafts internally, trying to create a to sort of distill the values that we would refer to going forward in the process. For action step 3, as many of you may recall, we did the retreat for participatory governance in the spring, and took all of the feedback from that, revised our core values, and then moved forward with drafting the themes for reorganizing the campus participatory governance structure. So we went through the DEI task force, drafted values for a purpose statement, and when we evaluated our committee structure, we essentially took all of the consolidated all of the various committees on campus, all of the operational tasks, all the operational committees, all of the participatory governance committees, and then tried to find all of the miscellaneous groups and categorize all of those until we could take on the retreat and try to get some feedback on what people thought it was important for our committee structure. So during the retreat, we used a similar process that we've seen for the campus plans and some of the other consultation methods on campus, getting together, sort of brainstorming, and these are a couple of the Padlets that we used during the retreat. And so the 4 main themes that we found were the committee structure itself, communication, participation, and culture and values. Essentially that communication between the groups is difficult. There's siloing is something that we've talked about frequently in other venues. The culture and values is huge. We've also talked about that for the campus plans. I mean, that was the crux of the 2019 DEIA campus climate survey, which spurred a lot of this activity. And then the committee structure itself, although we do have the participatory governance reference document, and a lot of it is codified, it's still somewhat inaccessible by the campus at large. And based on the original 2019 survey and the feedback from our retreats, that improving communication, all of these are sort of interrelated in making the participatory governance processes more easily accessible. So we took the feedback, went back and revised our core mission, and then took to committee reorganization, and this is the result. So
thanks. So during fall of 2022, the task force finalized this draft of how to reimagine our committees under the specific themes that were based on the retreat. And so the titles kind of identify kind of the common goal or purpose of the work that the committees or task force or work groups that are under them fulfill. So we came up with institutional effectiveness and accreditation, student journey and discovery, equitizing resources, professional growth and community building, and then the constituency groups, participatory governance. Can you go to the next slide? So then basically from there, we looked through all of the committee charges, as well as, again, some of the task force and work groups, and place them under the particular themes. And we did place academic senate committees, just again, because we were just working through the whole process. But again, this is part of why we're here with academic senate, to get feedback on where those are placed, and if Senate wants to have their committees be a part of this new structure. So we understand that some of the groups could have gone into different places or under different themes. But what we tried to do in the task force was to kind of think about the main intention or purpose, so that there could be a little bit more of that streamlined approach in terms of a group not being in all of them, so that we could sort of organize this concept. And so basically after that, we started to then define guiding principles. And so the guiding principles are basically how the work could get done, and sort of the philosophy behind meeting the goal, the common goals. And so this work really took us about 8 months, in terms of, we started it right after those retreats, and then we worked through all the way to fall. So that each theme really is intended to help the groups collaborate and work toward those common goals effectively, and to open up dialogue and crosstalk between the groups. So again, this is the way that we thought to mitigate the siloing that was sort of spoken out in a lot of the feedback at the retreats. We also thought sort of regrouping under these themes would kind of foster that collaborative and communal intergroup communication, and that would create a more supportive environment and would provide opportunities for folks to share knowledge and information, so that there would be that sort of work towards a common purpose. And if you look at the image, I mean, I know this one, the other one, the previous slide maybe does it better, but we intentionally didn't create this to look as a top down, but rather the arrows that are pointing and going in all the directions, because this really is a wheel, and that everyone contributes to the participatory governance structure, and that it's all dialogue. And that's really how it should be functioning. All right, Ryan.
So each of these titles is intended to be the goal or purpose for the groups, and then the guiding principles are the how we actually achieve that goal or purpose. So we also tried to align each of these themes with specific institutional plans, so that we can consider which groups are working together to fulfill the larger institutional goals. So the focus of each of the themes and our overall project, as we showed in one of the previous slides, was communication and the actual participatory governance structure, which was one of the charges of the A4A group. So although this approach is methodologically similar to how we are working on the plans, our main focus is organization and communication. So for instance, for the institutional effectiveness and accreditation, so we'll be evaluating processes, supporting college-wide planning activities, and then developing our long-term goals as they relate to the various plans. So we have an accompanying chart that will be in the links for this presentation that has each of these themes, guiding principles, the groups, and the institutional plans. Then for professional growth and community building, this was we've gone through a few different versions of this overall structure, and so some of the original themes have been consolidated. So one of the consolidations of note is for professional growth and community building. When we were discussing community building, which is a recurring theme all over discussions on campus, and then professional growth. One of the things that kept coming up was training, and that seemed to be a pretty significant overlap between those two themes. So we combined them into this particular theme, and then did our best to describe the various types of training and professional growth that might be ascribed to the different constituency groups. Then for student journey and discovery, this was one of the ones we've spent the most time on, since it's so important to the function of the college. But student journey and discovery, the title meaning what the student experience is from the outset of their enrollment to the time that they transfer or leave the college for whatever reason, whether it's so we attempted to encompass all the different types of students that might attend SBCC. And then for equitizing resources, although we did make a point of adding language referencing DEIA in all of the themes, for this theme, we wanted to consolidate all of the different ways of distributing resources, whether that be financial resources, the physical resources of classroom allocation, that sort of thing. Like, so essentially making sure that equitability is part of the discussion for distributing all of the different types of resources for the campus. Melissa?
So basically, again, just we sent out to the campus community an email, and I'm sure you all got it, in terms of sharing this information. Ryan and I created a video mostly focused on this latter, the step 5 and sort of the themes and the guiding principles, and we're soliciting feedback through that Google Doc that is linked. So I hope that we'll get some feedback from Senate in that capacity. Oh, did you want to talk about that, Ryan? I'm sorry.
This was just so when we went over the plans for CPC, they also were using themes, so that there is a just recognizing that there is sort of a synergy between these two approaches of taking the plans and moving from where we are to the future, and then trying to organize the communication about participatory governance through the themes that we have in the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically we're soliciting feedback from the campus community. We were hoping to get that feedback by Monday, the February 13th. That way then our group meets next week so we can process that feedback and continue to work on this. And I don't know, I know we're a presentation, so I don't know if there's time for questions. If anybody has questions, I don't know how this works.
If people have any questions, any clarifying questions, they can certainly ask those now.
Okay.
Any clarifying questions?
Mhm.
Kathy?
So am I to assume that the list of committees and so forth that you have there, they're existing committees, and will they continue to exist, or is your plan to, okay? And then
Yeah,
how, I'm
I guess
sorry.
that's okay. I'm sorry. I know it's hard, right? Zoom and in person. One bit of information we left out is we've been being mentored by Dr. El Solano. And so he's been helping to facilitate our work. He facilitated the retreats. And so basically phase 2 is we would then start putting together the committee chairs to start to have retreats around this idea, so that those chairs can start to think about how they can work within this new kind of framework. And so that would be the next step. But yeah, no, this is not about getting rid of committees or anything like that. It's taking all of the existing and sort of thinking about how to group them and then having folks kind of collaborate in those groups a bit so that we're working more efficiently, since we're all so strapped with time, and also just in a more collaborative spirit.
Okay, that's great. But just one more.
Yeah.
I think we have, with our Senate committees now, they have to have Senate Senate representation or faculty representation from each division. So we probably don't have the answer to that yet because you're still exploring this, but I think can be a great thing and can be a little problematic, but at least if we have it with some of the committees that are sort of key committees, I think that's useful. So did you have any thoughts about that ahead of time or?
Well, again, our charge was not to restructure Senate committees in terms
Right.
of their internal functioning. We were just doing more of the global, how could we reconfigure and reimagine how we work as a college in terms of our participatory governance structure. So it's more about trying to get the chairs of all of those committees together, maybe a meeting once a year, once a semester, as a way to kind of help, that work kind of move forward, or there just being more dialogue between those chairs. So that would really be the only thing that would impact folks in that regard.
Okay, well done.
And again, we're asking for the feedback. So, that's why if chairs of committees see their committee in a space and they think, well, we actually think we belong over here, that's the kind of feedback we want too, because we just worked on it through our understanding of the charges for the committees. And that's how we grouped them in this way.
Okay, thank you.
And this is just to reiterate, this is meant to be a collaborative, iterative process from beginning to end. We just as we got feedback from the retreats, we're looking for more feedback, then we'll go back and do work, come back with changes, and we're trying to take in input from everyone, and so that any changes that come about because of this are going to be with collaboration with the rest of the college.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any last questions? Thank you for the great presentation, Melissa and Ryan, really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I would encourage senators to put this in your notes and let your divisions know about this, so that they're getting it from you, they're getting it from campus email, because everyone knows how effective that is. And many sources, right?
There's also the feedback form. So if you don't want to write an email, we have everything. We're already getting a lot of feedback, so it's all consolidated in the form.
That's great. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
you.
All right, and that brings us to our next presentation. Is Rachel here? There she is. Rachel.
Hi,
Hi, are you going to talk to us about giving faculty endless amounts of money?
pretty much.
That was
Yes.
great.
Am I able to share a screen?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, let's see. Are you seeing a presentation page? Now I just lost my whole view, everybody, but
Yes, we are.
awesome. All right. So yes, my favorite topic, I get to talk about giving away money. And I want to, thank Melanie for inviting me to do that. We started a great conversation in the fall at a conference, kind of about always my desire to try to get more conversations about grants and funding with faculty, and also just chat more about what we do at the foundation and what I do to support all the wonderful work that you all do. So just quick overview, just because I know the foundation is not always something that's familiar to everybody in terms of what we do. So this is just a quick list of the types of funds that I get to oversee. So I'm the Chief Program Officer at the foundation, which is a bit of a corporate title. But the way I describe it to folks is that my colleague, our Chief Development Officer, is responsible for bringing lots of money in, and then I get the wonderful pleasure of moving all that money back out. And that goes back out to the college in a number of different ways. So the Promise, hopefully everyone's familiar with that one. And that's over $2 million each year that goes back to the college to support local grads in the Promise. Scholarships is another big one I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, because a lot of them are done through departments, and hopefully you've sat on scholarship committees or things in the past. There's a big set of program and department funds that I also oversee now. If you've been around a while, Gretchen Hewlett was probably your contact for a lot of program funds. So I get all of those as well. And that really varies. Tons of different departments have dedicated funds that have come in over the years for various things, either bequests or individual donations that come in. We do a lot of support for athletics teams and other areas that kind of do their own fundraising as well. Then we have something called discretionary funds, and I put that in quotes because they are also funds that are sometimes restricted the way grants and other funds are, but more so they are flexible. So probably about $500,000 we have in a variety of funds. And those are really the ones that, you know, where the foundation and its flexibility can really step in to fund things that the campus can't always, or departmental funds can't always. We all know that state funds and public monies are much more restricted. And that's, you know, one of the great values that the foundation can provide to the college is that our monies are often very much less restricted. Emergency funds, relatively small amount, but that is getting bigger and bigger, as I'm sure you've seen with your students. Basic needs emergencies and other situations have become much more common, and we're learning about more and more places where that's a really necessary intervention. So we are also kind of bolstering our emergency fund capacity and working with a lot of partners at the college around all the other support and emergency funds that we have. And then the last one is grants, which really what we'll talk about the rest of the time, and I will keep it brief. And I put the sky's the limit because that's really my main thing for grants, is just increasing our capacity and helping, more and more grant funds flow to campus from different places. So quick overview just of what kinds of funds, right? So I think most folks, when they think about grants on our campus, probably rightly so, think of the really large Title III and Title V Department of Education grants that we've had over the years and that have funded incredible programs. Our most recent one to launch is the Raices program, which was a Title V grant that came in recently. So those are kind of the big marquee grants, because they usually last 3 to 5 years and bring in millions and millions of dollars. But there are a lot of other federal grants that have come through as well and are administered through the foundation. So ed grants related to HSI status are done directly through the college, but a lot of other federal grants and even some smaller Department of Education grants like TRIO programs that aren't tied to the HSI status can actually be applied for through the foundation as well, so we can help administer them. So some of the examples we've had in the past, the IMLS has a partnership with the American Association of Museums. We got a grant from them to support building the capacity of the Atkinson Gallery. We had a USDA grant to study food insecurity on campus with our students. We've had a number of NSF grants that Jens has helped facilitate over the years. And then we are wrapping up an Environmental Protection Agency grant, actually, for environmental education related to environmental horticulture and like the food pantry garden, if you've ever been to that garden on East Campus that grows a lot of food. So those are all done through the foundation. We also do state and local, so money through the county. The Santa Barbara County Office of Arts and Culture has done grants. We have some county partnerships. around programs in our jail and some other ones. The CAC is the Community Art, our California Arts Council, if anyone's familiar with that one. And then most of the other, say 25 to 30 grants that we administer throughout the year are from foundations or banks or corporations and local partners. So that's everything from big banks that you'd recognize to Rotary clubs in town, San Ynez Band of Chumash, and other kind of a variety of foundations and family foundations. So one really big thing, I mean, I wanted, to say to Senate is basically, I really want to stay in touch with more departments and more faculty so that I know the kinds of ideas that you all have and also the kinds of needs that you're seeing in your programs. I don't know all of you personally, but I have an academic background, so I really love working on research projects as much as I love, working on the capacity of things like basic needs and student services. And I've had the opportunity in the past to work with a lot of you on some really interesting grants from the more sort of academic side as well as student services side. So the process that we have is really, it's fairly open. At the foundation, we always try to maintain an open door policy. If you have ideas, if you have some big grand idea that you can't imagine how to fund, we really want to hear about those ideas so that I can do my own grant research better, but also connect folks, with other people on campus who might have similar ideas or who might already be doing work in a similar idea or a similar area. We also created a process a couple years ago. Gosh, it seems so long ago, but that was kind of a joint task force was brought together. Z Reese facilitated that. And we tried to come up with, some more process-oriented ideas for how to make sure grants were something that as many folks as possible knew about on campus, so that there would be kind of dissemination of grant opportunities with the hope that more people would be interested in grants and also feel like they have access to working on grant programs if that's something they're interested in. So my main part of that is when I do find a grant opportunity that is relevant to sort of a broad enough group of stakeholders on campus, I produce kind of one-page information sheets. And we agreed as part of that process that putting those on agendas at CPC and Faculty Senate would be the best way to disseminate something quickly to the broadest possible kind of campus audience. So we kind of started doing that a couple years ago now. You may not have seen many because there actually haven't been a lot of really kind of broad open opportunities that have come up lately. So keep your eye out for those, right? When those do come up, and I'm actually about to do a batch of them that will come to the Academic Senate. Yeah, coming up probably this spring. So that, like I said, the process there is fairly open in terms of just, if I find a grant that I know is relevant, my first step is to sort of disseminate that out through the agendas, but then also to follow up with deans and chairs and faculty members who work in those areas that are related to the grant opportunity as well. Upcoming opportunities. When I started thinking about this presentation in the fall, there were a few more that I would have put on this list, but now the deadlines are quite close. So technically, the only ones I wanted to call out for you are the ones where I will be putting together info sheets soon and disseminating those, which is the National Endowment for the Humanities, has a number of grant programs that are actually really open, not just for humanities faculty, because they have Humanities Connections program that actually is looking for collaboration between humanities and career pathways or non-humanities departments and divisions to actually collaborate. So those will be coming out soon. They also have broad initiatives that are just for HSIs or community colleges. So it can really be kind of a really broad range of ideas related to the humanities on our campus. And then ongoing ones. So these are ones where the deadline might be too soon from this presentation to kind of, I don't want to spring, a 2-week deadline on someone. But they are almost all of them come back around. So they're not often one-time opportunities. So just to kind of put them on folks' radar, there are some federal grants available for folks interested in study abroad. So expanding study abroad opportunities, especially for disproportionately impacted populations. So support basically for faculty who want to develop study abroad programs. So that's always nice, finding funding that can help you travel as well. There's a handful of Department of Ed grants related to things like open source textbooks or digital humanities, different kind of initiatives like that come around quite regularly. There are some foundation grants related to small capital projects. And I always like to mention that, especially to faculty, because I think small equipment, right? Capital expenses are things that we often think it's hard to find money for, but there are grants that we can find money for a lot of those things. There's some private foundations that have a couple of grant programs. One in particular I wanted to call out, liberal arts transfer pathways. So I know related to guided pathways work and things like that, there are some private sources of funds that are interested in that work. Like I said, NSF grants, we've had a number, and those are definitely fairly regular programs that come up. And Jens leads those, and I've learned pretty much everything I know about NSF from Jens and helping with those along the way. And there's really just so many more. Every year am the chair of something called the Federal Funding Task Force, which is a volunteer task force or committee through CASE, which is the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. So it's an international organization dedicated to helping higher ed organizations raise money, so to leverage philanthropy. And when I chair that task force, we basically go to Washington, D.C. every year to meet with federal agencies and find out about opportunities specific to community colleges. So it's focused on two-year institutions and really making sure that they have access to funds the same way that four-year research institutions really seem to take kind of bigger parts of those federal pies often. So it's advocacy work, but it's also, we get a lot of really great insider information from federal program officers. So every year in November, I come home with basically a massive list of federal grants that could be relevant and could touch just about every corner of our campus. So that's something I'm regularly doing, which is why I always love learning from you. What are the ideas that you all have, and what kinds of things are you seeing in your departments that might help me kind of narrow down things and send those opportunities along, to the places where they can be. So I think that's my last slide. There you go. I'm just going to end with that's my contact information. I definitely just love, getting together, chatting, learning about what ideas you have, what kinds of things you see as needs. And I have, in terms of support, I always like to say, so we're a small team, just like the college has lots of small teams, right? We don't have a large grants office at Santa Barbara City College. Not many community colleges have huge, robust grants offices or offices of sponsored research, but we've got, I'm at the foundation, I have a part-time grant support specialist, and we are basically available to the college to help facilitate grants applications and different processes. And we work really closely with Z and institutional research, and basically any partners on campus that want to reach out and for our assistance in anything like that. So I'm happy to take questions if anyone has some. I tried to keep that quick. I think 3:45 was the next aspirational agenda item. So we're a little beyond that, but happy to take questions or just leave you with this presentation. And I'm really happy that I got to present.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Hi,
Rachel, this is Tara Carter from.
Hi, Tara.
Hi.
Hello.
First, I'll probably get in touch with you because maybe we should try out for that NEH again, but when you talked about the small capital
Yeah.
grants, there are a number of very small labs in the social sciences that we kind of always try to fund out of pocket. And I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing that we could get in touch with you about. I know in anthropology, we really want to buy, I know, don't laugh, but we really want to buy some replicas of fossilized human skulls for Australopithecines and Neanderthals. But they're very expensive, but it's very, very difficult to find a grant opportunity. Is that something that we could?
Yeah.
kind of do with?
I mean, absolutely, right? Like in terms of comfort, yes. I don't know how much those things cost. Some of the grants I'm talking about, really are, under $4,500 is basically.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know how expensive that when you say those are
That to
expensive.
me is expensive.
But absolutely, right? And even things like that, departments can't find budgets for. We don't have, an unrestricted amount of fully unrestricted dollars, but absolutely, right? The foundation, whether it's through grant support that I can find a grant program that's applicable to, or if it's something like thinking about looking at our discretionary funds to see if it fits any of those. That's why I really want to underscore, like, any idea or need, the foundation would love to hear about it, right? And I want to help you get skulls, Tara.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm looking, I see Josh, and I'm like, he's got a psych lab, so Josh, you should connect too with Rachel. Thank you very much.
And I see that Trisha has a question for you, and then we'll move on. Oh, wait, Jeff, is that a question or is that just a finger pointing at the screen? Trisha. Yeah, okay, Trisha, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, Rachel, I just was, if you could briefly clear up something with the emergency grants, for students. So is, maybe give me another example, or is that something that would be like an individual student would apply for? I have a feeling I should know this, but I just wondered if you could elaborate.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And no, you shouldn't really know anything in any direction about those, because emergency grants is really something we are learning in real time. So we don't actually accept kind of grant applications like from students for that. Our process with that money has been to, that's something that an advocate on campus comes to us on behalf of a student generally. And there are, lots of equity considerations with that. Not every student in need has an advocate or someone that they can go to access it. So that's also why, we're figuring out now how to expand access to emergency grants. But in the past, as an example, a student had their bike stolen. It was their primary way of getting to campus and getting to their job. So we bought them a bike, right? Like we've generally done it where we pay third parties so we can buy a bike, we can talk to a landlord. And that kind of keeps it simpler from our kind of auditing standpoint of using funds for kind of atypical expenses like that. Right now, I'm working really closely with Maureen in financial aid and Roxanne in the Basic Needs Center, and Paloma and Christina Yarena, sort of a larger working group that's coming up with kind of what emergency grants are really going to look like on campus. So if you have a student in need, the first place to send them is the Basic Needs Center. Roxanne and her team, like that's the kind of main point of contact on campus for students in need right away. And then she helps now kind of funnel those to the foundation when there's need perhaps for like private dollars or something else that we can help with.
Right. And I can email you about this later, but non-credit students too are eligible. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, right? With the foundation having our funds are private, we are far less restricted, so we can really be open to at least kind of considering a lot of different scenarios, not differentiated between like part-time, full-time, non-credit, credit. So
great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I think that you need to add more dollars on your last slide. Just
right. Well, I didn't know how many memojis, is too many.
I think the money emoji is really catchy vibe. Yeah, right.
And it looks like you.
It does look like.
It's kind of amazing how, I mean, I don't have a scarf on right now, but I often do. So it's a good one.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Right. Okay, and that moves us to section 8, which is discussion and possible action. And this is going to be interesting because as there are Zoomers and rumors, not with a U, right? Oh, no one's paying any attention, right? I'm just
That was
ignoring
really
that.
very sad.
Yeah, I know, really, really sad. I need more coffee. We have on the Zoom room, I feel like a game show host right now. We have Joshua Ramirez. And in the actual room, we have Justina Buller. And both of them are here to talk to us about some recommendations from the CFR, which is the Committee on Faculty Resources. And I don't know how you're gonna
Yeah.
start? Okay, all right.
So I'm Justina Fuller, the chair of the Committee on Faculty Resources. We refer to it as the CFR. So I'm here in that capacity today. And my good colleague Joshua Ramirez, we talk a lot about anything that has to do with instruction. So he has been invited to come to the CFR, several times to talk around DE issues in instruction. So it's a conversation a little bit bigger than just me. So over the course of the fall, a lot of questions started to emerge in the CFR around the quality of instruction on our campus. Really issues very, very deeply rooted in pedagogy. And it became clear to us that these are issues, concerns, topics that are absolutely rooted in 10+1. So these are Senate purview. And these are only questions that a Senate subcommittee could answer. But it's also apparent to us that these questions that have emerged around quality of instruction are not technically under the purview of the CFR. If you look at our duties and obligations, some of them are tangential. It makes sense that we're talking, right? But it's not technically in our purview. It doesn't really look like they're in anybody's purview. And it's not even necessarily COI. Joshua Ramirez happens to co-chair that with Kim Monda, because COI isn't a Senate subcommittee. Yes, they talk about instruction just like the CFR does, but it's really, it's like this nebulous land where these issues live.
Justina, you need the hand motion.
Murky. All right. Yeah. So this is the question that has emerged, Melanie, is this fits in a murky area, right? One, because of the thing I just mentioned, it's definitely, it's a 10+1, it's a Senate, and we don't have a committee for that. It's murky because I'll kind of list some of the issues in a second. They're very difficult topics. There's not easy answers to them. It seems like we need massive collaboration and discussion on these. So it's very interesting that our presentation today rode on the heels of what Melissa and Ryan were talking about with committee structures and the need for more communication and collaboration. So, it's a difficult question. Another reason why it's, I think, a murky area is because we see the colliding of pedagogy with policy. And that is always complicated. So some of the topics that have come up have been around evaluations. Cornelia and I and Josh have been talking about this, and so that's one of those places where evaluations touch on many different parts of our campus. So with FA, it's very policy, procedure, but then where's the pedagogy side of that, like the quality of instruction? So that's one topic that's come up. AI and like disciplinary action, things like that. There's not really a committee that is tasked with explicitly addressing these kinds of things. Academic freedom, that really started to come up under our past Senate president, and then Melanie has really followed through on that as well. And Melanie actually came to the CFR and asked us to discuss this, and we were happy to. But it's also this like, wait, so where does this live? And it seems to be living in the murky area right now. You know, I know there was a very lively debate about proctorial in the recent past at Senate. But again, it's not quite clear where this stuff lives. And then undergirding all of this is this question of, well, what's the best practice through the lens of equity? And in the very last meeting that CFR had, it was late November, we'll meet next week for our first time. We kept coming back to this question of why isn't there a space, a body, a committee whose explicit charge is teaching and learning, like excellence in teaching and learning, something that really addresses quality of instruction. And more than just.
Moving down that road.
Yeah, I know, there's a history here, and fortunately, we had some people in the committees, one of our deans and others. Kim Monda's been able to give some helpful history behind the evolution, and it turns out we did used to have a committee on teaching and learning. And then that was expanded, dissolved, I'm not sure the right word there, but kind of replaced with the CFR. And I today went back and looked at the charge of the CFR, and I was like, ooh, wow, I'm not really sure that that's the best use maybe of our resources and our time. And so a conversation that has emerged from our committee membership is this possibility of maybe bringing back a committee on teaching and learning, or, maybe we can envision something even better and bigger and bolder. Our times are very different, but there are so many issues emerging. We're not quite sure whose purview it is. It's a murky area, but it's super important. And it's definitely 10+1, it's definitely Senate. So we felt like the conversation had evolved enough that it was time to open it up. This just can't be something that one committee is talking about, or, can't be something we're talking about in conjunction just with another committee co-chair. So yeah, we just kind of wanted to bring the conversation up to a larger crowd, bigger room, and kind of see where it goes from there, get some input, bring more people in the conversation. So that's kind of the context I'm bringing. Josh, you want to tag in?
I think that the word that we're trying to stick to is murky. We are looking to Senate for some advice about how to handle this. For my part, I'm being co-chair for COI, and I've only been at this for about just the last semester, and we are diving headlong into conversations where really it's not really COI's purview to be able to handle. COI's discussions, from what I can tell, largely revolve around the showcase and maybe the evaluation of things like new digital technologies for instruction or new rubrics to improve quality of instruction as well. But occasionally that conversation about tools and rubrics turns to pedagogy. Like, for example, an ongoing discussion revolves around moving more and more faculty to have their courses CVC OEI approved to get on the California Virtual College and to advertise courses there. We can offer trainings, we can incentivize faculty. Lord knows, Rob Brown has been trying very hard to get faculty on board for this. We can look to our APs on distance ed and say, look, our college's quality standards have a lot of standards in common with the CVC OEI rubric. But there's no enforceability behind any of it. There's been discussion of a need for a certification process. And certainly we can think to use the rubric as part of those quality standards. But again, there's no enforceability behind it except for evaluation. And that's really not COI's purview. Very few faculty are even trained on the whole CVC OEI rubric to evaluate other faculty's teaching. And the rubric looks at far, far, far more for online education than we do in face-to-face. And I've had this conversation with Kathy O as well. We treat online as its own thing. But at the same time, we have a conversation on the other side that says, we have to have equivalency between the modalities, but obviously the evaluation process is far more involved now because we know to look for more in online teaching than we ever did in the space of a 50-minute face-to-face evaluation. And on Justina's point about AI, in the recent threads that the faculty have been weighing in on this chat GPT that is emerging, there was a question that came up that asked, well, what if we can use these new tools that are online to be able to plug in students' writing and make a determination, was this chatbot generated? There are tools that are out there. Can we actually say this was a tool that detected the use of AI? Can I give a student a 0? We have policies in place that talk about students submitting work that isn't their own. But what if they have something that is AI assisted, for example? What are the protocols in play for this? Ultimately, this is going to come down to, as usual, the instructor and the chair. We may be able to have that conversation elevated to the dean's level, but we always try to handle that at the instructional level. How do we advise faculty in this kind of new territory that we're dealing with? But again, those are some things that may ultimately have implications for policy, and really those go towards more of Senate's purview.
Okay, so this is discussion and possible action. Thoughts from senators about this?
What kind of action are you thinking of for today?
Well, possible action, right?
To do what?
Well, she said that they were suggesting a new committee. Yes, a
Well,
committee on teaching and learning.
I think the idea is to run the discussion a little bit and then start to think about where the direction. So I see the action in, okay, what are some of the next steps that we can take here?
Hold on a sec. There was Ellen Carey had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted, I'm not sure all of us here know this. I wanted to mention that COI used to be a Senate committee. I've been on COI, I think this is my 12th year, and at least the first few years, and actually Lori was on it too, so she probably remembers this better than I do. I think she's here. Anyway, it was a Senate committee for a long time, and then it the structure changed. And I have been a proponent of it returning to being a Senate committee. That was something that did come up some last year, partly in the context of the recommendation from COI to switch from Proctorio to Respondus, and then the Senate's reaction against that recommendation. And I think part of the challenge with that whole process was that that COI was not a Senate committee. I have to say now, though, that we're, when I first started on COI, there was a relatively small percentage of us who were teaching online, and that increased every year, but certainly with the pandemic, it changed completely. So I'm not sure. I think a lot of things that have historically lived in COI and maybe would have worked better if COI had been a Senate committee now would work better in a more general committee on teaching and learning, because I don't think the idea of sort of segregating modalities, like this is one kind of teaching and this is another kind of teaching, like certainly there are differences, but we're also doing a lot of blending of modalities and trying to think more holistically, and I think that's valuable. And I also think that it needs to be led by Senate as part of 10+1. So whether, whether, COI becomes a Senate committee again, or something else becomes a Senate committee, but I think if it is a different, committee on teaching and learning, I think there needs to be a really strong relationship between that committee and COI. I wouldn't say that in general, there's been a strong relationship between CFR and COI, at least not in a formal way. Certainly, depending on who's on the committee at a time, there's overlap. But I think having like a more formal connection, if COI is to exist in the form it exists now would be really valuable.
Can I respond to that
Yeah,
real
please.
quickly? Just Ellen, yeah, thank you. I think everything you said there is very accurate and that's true. There has not historically, while I was a member or didn't chair, been much connection or collaboration with COI, which now just seems kind of insane for the very reasons you highlighted. Yeah, so thank you.
And just to, you know, add into the points that you made, Ellen, so many of us in a semester can be teaching face-to-face and hybrid and fully online. That is not unusual anymore. And so we are working in all of these modalities. So weird that we don't have a place to be, you know, that you would have to go, you take part of you and you go over here. You take part of you and you go kind of nowhere, right? So.
Yeah, and like the delineation between in-person and online is, it's not as clear as it once used to be. I mean, in-person classes, for the credit side anyway, you use Canvas. We use a lot of the Canvas tools that are used online, like discussion boards or quizzes or assignment submissions, posting notes and whatever, and that's all online. Right, so this idea that these are two mutually exclusive modalities is just not the reality anymore.
Ellen, I mean, sorry. Yeah, I know. Yeah. You guys are on the same side. You're on the same side of the.
Absolutely. So, the long history of all this is in the 1990s when we started teaching online. We actually started with a process where everyone who taught online had to go through a certain training. And there was some work with each faculty on pedagogy. When all of a sudden this thing blew up, the administration really had no will left to make faculty go through a real training. And so it sort of became a little hodgepodge. COI started out as an ed programs committee. It moved to a Senate committee for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And then because Senate committees had to have divisional representation, and we couldn't have sort of the dynamic group of online faculty who really enjoyed being on COI because we shared a bunch of stuff, it sort of went back to the ed programs committee. We have been having the discussions about evaluation of online courses for years. I've taken many recommendations through. I worked with David Wong. We developed a whole rubric. We took it to COI. There's never been any faculty energy behind bringing something like that to the Senate to get the Senate to actually say, yes, we should be doing some kind of course evaluation. Many colleges have a requirement that their online faculty go through some type of certification. Doesn't have to be OEI, but it could be something. The faculty senate's never had the will to actually impose that on their colleagues because there's always been so much pushback. So I think it's great, and I think the online and face-to-face, like you said, there should be something, but we can't just form a committee called Teaching and Learning unless we're going to give that committee the power of the Senate to actually begin to do some type of evaluation. Otherwise, it's going to end up like it always has been if we don't have the courage to say, this is what we think we should all do. We're all going to help each other do it great. And these are the sort of the standards that we would like to see. And we've worked on the evaluation thing for years, the online, and you know, that's only a one-shot deal. And with the way it's set up, somebody's only in your class for maybe 2 weeks. I let somebody in my class the whole semester. How the hell are they ever going to evaluate my class if they're not in it for the whole semester? So we have all these differing kinds of approaches. So if we really care about this, as a Senate, we have to take some action to say, yes, we're going to implement some type of evaluation of our courses. Otherwise, don't bother. Setting up another committee is going to help.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So isn't there a certification outlined in AP 4105?
There is, but we've never implemented it. When Kenley was here and he was the dean of distance ed at Coy, we actually rewrote the policy. We actually brought it to the Senate, and there was a process for certification, but it's never been implemented. There's never been any energy on the part of the administration or the faculty to actually implement anything.
Well, I think what's interesting now is we see our students suffering for many reasons in many different ways. And so what can we do as teachers to give them the best experience that suits them? And maybe this is the moment. We have a few hands, Elizabeth, and then Ellen, did you put your hand down? You? Yeah.
I put it down just because I didn't want to dominate the discussion, but I'll go after Elizabeth
Okay,
unless someone else wants to speak.
Elizabeth?
Hi. I just had a question because when Kathy was talking and people were saying stuff about this committee, they kept on bringing up the word evaluation. And do you mean just hey, I kind of think this is a good idea, or do you mean like an official evaluation? Because isn't that an FA thing, not a Senate thing? So I'm a little confused.
The evaluation policy is already in the FA. I think we're really talking about more than that. So we're really talking about course evaluation, pedagogy, training to help people be better. And it's really, I don't know how we can infuse all that into the evaluation process. Really two different things.
And if Josh is willing to speak to it, we don't have a recertification process. Because the technology change all the time, and I know Josh has really been working on that. Josh, could you share just a bit?
And that would also be difficult to be able to do because we kind of put the cart before the horse already. We've all changed the way that we teach online. A lot of us have. But to suddenly go back and say to instructors who are seasoned online instructors, you've got to go through a new certification process again. That brings up its own challenges. And also when you start to level up how many things that we're going to look at in their courses, then there is a valid argument to be able to say, well, what do you mean this doesn't work? I only tried this last year and or a couple of years prior, and I was evaluated fine back then. What's changed? So yeah, there are some real challenges in doing that, and also recognizing the experience that faculty bring to the table when it comes to this work. And when we say, okay, here are the new things that we're going to be looking for in the evaluation process.
And I'll just add to that, Josh, right? We have more students than ever wanting to take courses online. And the difference in performance from in-person to online, we have not solved that problem.
No.
Only now you just have more students taking it online. Worse.
Yeah.
And we never had a certification process to begin with. You need to understand that there was never any required certification of any kind.
Back in the day.
Anytime, and from back in the day to now, there's nothing.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah,
before- Just,
yeah.
Ellen, I'm sorry, it's just because it's in response to Elizabeth, is that okay? Elizabeth, I think we're definitely thinking about evaluations in a different or expanded way here, in the sense that it's not about, do you show up? Do you get a passing mark on everything? But let's say a colleague observes you and says, hey, I think you could do better in this area. Great. Now what, right? Where do you go for help? Where are the resources for that? Is there a body on campus that is able to have a collective sense? Where are we collectively struggling as faculty? And then actually able to use collective resources in a way that are strategic and targeting, a common problem that's emerging. We don't have a body or a committee that's really charged with that right now. So in some ways it could be, I guess a different way you can talk about this is actually using our existing evaluation process in a way that better informs our work, that there's follow through on that. And so it's definitely not thinking through a punitive model with the evaluation process. It's about support and where do we allocate our resources best. So I hope that helps a little bit, Elizabeth. Thumbs up.
Right, we're gonna go to Ellen and then we're going to go to Cornelia.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Justina, for that, because and Elizabeth for bringing up the evaluation thing, because I also just wanted to revisit some of the relatively recent history. I lose track with the pandemic, but it was sometime just before the pandemic that the Senate moved a responsibility for evaluation back to the FA. And I know, I think last year and maybe the year before too, we had presentations from the FA on where they were in that process. I know when I was on the FA board, we did some work on that too. So I guess part of this may be a question for Cornelia about an update on that. I do remember that there was a discussion of how it could be approached as an opportunity for growth more than as a, punishment, like you're a bad teacher and, slap on the wrist or whatever. Like instead, here are ways for improvement. And I think what you just said, Justina, about then having a mechanism for supporting that improvement is certainly valuable too, and maybe something that happens outside of the FA contract. But I think it's I'll use the word you used before, like murky here, sort of what is to be part of the collective bargaining agreement. I know when that first happened, the move of that, and then TLU limits was the other thing that Senate moved to the FA. Like we were really unusual in this state. If I remember correctly, we were the only college that had those things under Senate purview rather than the union purview. But I feel like we're still in this sort of in-between place where it hasn't, as far as I know, hasn't been finalized or, fully negotiated by the FA. And it's also like we as Senate haven't been working on the AP or anything. There was even some discussion, I can't remember, last year or the year before, about some updates to the AP. And I think we were told that we couldn't even make like minor corrections because it was being worked on by the union. So yeah, I don't know, Cornelia, if you have any clarification on any of that.
I want to leap in here for just 1 second. We're going to go to Cornelia and I see Anna's hand. On our impossible timeline for academic freedom, don't nod at me like that. I like that. At our next meeting, in fact, Cornelia is going to be talking to us about this. So, I mean, it really is interesting how all of these pieces are fitting together. So,
Yeah, sure. And Ellen, let's start at the farthest back point in time. That was in December 2019, in fact, right before the pandemic started. That was that Senate meeting when the Senate voted that the FA should take on negotiations. And for those who were there, you might remember that in that discussion, we outlined that because our AP 7151, the evaluation procedures, has basically two parts. The top part, which outlines those 5 criteria, and then the more procedural part of the evaluation process. And we discussed at that meeting, and I remember Patricia Stark even said, well, maybe we should keep the criteria part, the criteria, as an AP on the Senate, and then the FA mainly works on the procedural part. And this is pretty much also under this idea, this is how the FA functioned, that we were always like aware that the criteria, that is where pedagogy lives. This is where the Senate has the expertise, and you should like be the ones driving that, and we are working on the procedural part. We did, however, also meet with Joshua and with Justina to kind of like see, how are we practically then building that into the procedural part. And one thing that I would like to point our attention on, in AP 4105, and again, it gets even murkier, in AP 4105, there's a total of 30 line items. Standards of online instruction, right? And I mean, 30 line items, that's almost like 30 criteria. One of the things that this is kind of impossible to build into an evaluation procedure. How is an evaluator supposed to evaluate a course and the online instruction on 30 line items? This is not happening. And what kind of like, again, murky is for me is that the standards, quality standards of online instruction, which should be an academic set of purview, is something that goes to BPAP. I'm not quite sure how this all fits together. And yeah, whatever the FA can do to kind of like link this all together and work with the academic center, we are totally on board with this.
Yeah.
I just want to, yeah, and as Melanie said, yeah, there's actually a presentation coming up
Next week, next time.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anna,
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, share a couple of things. My first thought is related to the certification process of online teaching, and it seems like it would be something that would make sense to require to be updated or recertified regularly, considering the pace at which technology changes. You know, when online teaching first became a thing, maybe it wasn't as critical because technology may not have been changing as swiftly as it is now, but it seems reasonable that there should be some sort of requirement for re-upping that certification to make sure that folks are keeping up with best practices and new technology, and not just, you know, sitting in the comfort zone of what we've always known. The other piece related to the evaluations and committees and where it kind of falls could be partially because I don't participate in these committees, so I may not understand exactly what the what is covered in those spaces, but I'm wondering if, I guess I heard two things. One is the evaluation process, but then with Justina's clarification, it really sounded like it was more related to the remediation or support in improvement of whatever the evaluation process is. And so I'm wondering how that differs from like PDAC or FRC charge, and whether that's something that I guess could be folded into that. So that's more of a question, I guess. And I always hesitate about adding more committees without first reevaluating our current committees and practices and making sure that they are actually meeting the needs of what our faculty have right now, and maybe, you know, readjusting what that might look like.
thank you, Anna. Justina, would you like to address that?
Sure, I'll do part, and then I think Josh probably has some things to add too. It's a really great question, Anna. So I don't see this living with PDAC. PDAC really exists. Well, first of all, it's supposed to be focused on professional development for the whole campus. And yeah, staff, the administrators, et cetera, managers. And for those of us that sit in the PDAC space, we try to be very careful about not letting faculty needs just take over and consume that whole space. So it's really a place about like cross-campus professional development. And you know, 3/4 of the committee would quit if we start talking about evaluations in there. And that committee really grew out of a requirement too by the state for us to track flex and professional development hours. So in some ways, it's more of a compliance committee too around that. And then the FRC, and Josh can weigh in here too. We've talked a lot with Rob about this. The FRC really exists as a space to give us tools to fill in our gaps around technology needs. And their purview is not pedagogy. Their purview is not discussions around what is quality online instruction. What should be assessed in an evaluation of an online instructor, right? Like that is not the FRC. So that, again, that's kind of where I think CFR used to be historically when it was the Committee on Teaching and Learning, but then that went away. And then that charge doesn't really exist. It's not what the CFR does. And it's, I don't think what COI does either, but I'll let Josh speak to that.
On Anna's question about where this lives, about quality instruction, I mean, the FRC, I want to make clear, there are lots of shades to what we call equitable teaching online. One of the biggest things that the FRC does particularly well is on dealing with the accessibility part about this, that portion that speaks to universal design for lots of differently abled students, for whom their needs cannot be marginalized in online instruction. But if you're talking about culturally responsive teaching practices, if you're talking about anti-racist practices in online, then that really has to rest with faculty and instructors who are very versed in these areas, and how those practices that are considered culturally responsive actually translate into our online teaching practices. So there are lots of hands that have to go into not just for the professional development around equity, but also the theoretical basis behind it too.
And I would add to that too, like historically, since I've been here at least, which isn't much less time than Josh, so much of the training I've gotten around culturally responsive pedagogy, anti-racist pedagogy, just general DEIA pedagogical practices, were in kind of boutique spaces. They were spaces that were funded by special grants, things like that. And that doesn't seem right. Like this should just be standard, like accessible to everybody. It's not a optional, like, oh, I'm going to opt into this kind of training sort of thing. So that's like my vision, as I hopefully see our campus moving towards a place where we just have like standard resources and practices for folding this into all corners of the campus, not just faculty that want to opt into a special grant funded training.
And just, right, to add to, when it was grant funded training, it excluded some of our instructors, like a non-credit had a hard
Non-credit
time
couldn't
participating, and that's
Yeah.
that's not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think I truly adore teaching. This is days when you come to campus and you're like, nah. And then you get in the classroom and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. And I think that your teaching has to change and develop, and everyone hits tough patches. And how great would it be to be able to go to a committee and say, hey, this is not working. It's always worked. It's not working. What do you have? How can you help me? So that it's taken, so improving our teaching is not something that's done in the dark with the lights off once every 3 years. It's something that, that you just see, you bring out into the daylight and you say, I would like some help with this. And I'm just gonna analogize this to writing. When I was an undergrad, I was so good at writing intro paragraphs, and my conclusions absolutely sucked. They were horrible, just appalling. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna get those down. And I did, I got those down. But what slipped were the opening paragraphs. And so my point, right, is it's always shifting, it's always changing. And who we are at teachers at different times in our life with different pressures should be nurtured and fostered. It makes us better teachers. It builds us together as a community of teachers. We are a community college. Our mission is teaching. And I think it would be so great for that to be supportive and not just some distasteful thing that's going to happen to you and happen to you, right? Rather than you're a participant in it. And you get to say, hey, I'd like to tweak this or tweak that, I don't know. But anyway, other thoughts? Tricia?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, you're kind of back to a question that someone posed earlier about what like the next steps or so. So we're just kind of explore like this, like the first reading, I guess, of the idea. And so would it be that, how does a committee get created? And would we want to get more input from various constituency groups about what that committee would look like? I'm just, I'm thinking ahead a little bit, and then, yeah, I'll just stop there. How does a committee get created, and or what would we want to do next to see if this is something that's needed as a separate committee, or perhaps amending the charge to an existing committee?
Well, I wonder if the first thing to do is to go back to COI and CFR, bring this conversation with them. Yeah, and to your divisions. Thank you, Tara. And to your divisions, and see what they have to say. Right? I think let's take this out and let's see what people have to say. We as the Senate can create these committees. So that we can do, but let's see how people feel about it, especially the existing committees, especially COI, especially CFR. See what they have to say and what their insight is. I do think it's kind of fascinating that this emerged from CFR, sort of an organic way, like we need a place to talk about pedagogy.
So this would be, if it's, again, just trying to, if I'm talking to people about, I'm anticipating questions, sort of envision maybe a committee that meets once or twice a month, and they will address ways to create professional development opportunities or resources,
I think
or
Tara
address
has-
immediate
right.
needs.
Trisha, I think that's the question, right? So we go, we say, as senators, go back to your divisions and say, we had this discussion. Margarita is taking notes. We have our lucky Margarita. We have our recording so people can look at that. In your mind, knowing your division, what is it they will want to know? You know them best. What's their angle going to be on this? And then bring back their questions and concerns. So we can absolutely agendize this for our February 18th meeting, which maybe goes really well with the discussion, the continuing discussion of academic freedom with the presentation from the FA. And
Evaluation. I'm presenting on evaluation.
Evaluation, yes. What did I say? Academic freedom. We are talking about academic freedom. We are always fucked up. It's spring 23, you guys, academic freedom all the way. So that's already on the agenda. The FA evaluation is already on the agenda. And I think it would be useful to get some feedback from your division to see what they think. And one of the questions that you could ask is the question that Tricia has, which is what do you imagine the purview would be of this? The things that we've talked about here are pedagogy, other forms of recertifying for online.
Certified for online. There's no certification. It never happened.
Okay, we need to keep Kathy alive, so certifying for online. We have the general discussion about the place or the possible role of the committee, right? Those seem to be the really big things. Some other things might have stuck out for you. Bring that back. And I will write this down and I will send this to you so that you'll have like a little charge for the next meeting. Does that seem reasonable?
And I would just add to, I mean, some of the roles that the committee would take would be perhaps this idea about moving beyond only thinking about your teaching when you're under evaluation. Right, maybe the committee is the one who helps to with mentorship, almost like a teaching lab, a lab for teachers, right? Or something along those lines that we could ask our divisions, is that something that you would be grateful for, that you would be happy to welcome to have? Then that might help us to change the narrative that we have about evaluations, which is always seen as punitive rather than as an opportunity for professional development.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, we don't want it to be scary. So,
But it is, and if we normalize it, I mean, I like doing evaluations of people, especially people outside of my department, because it's like, oh,
You learn stuff.
that's so cool. I can use that. I can repurpose that. It would be great if we had a committee that just helped us do that all the time.
We should bring a copy of the distance education policy language, so we see what the language is actually there that's never been enforced. What? It's not that bad.
Okay, there's a little, you guys can't hear this because they're whispering to each other about
Sorry about the
a
AP.
disagreement about the AP. So I will also link to that so people can decide for themselves. Does any other thoughts, anything else you guys would like us to bring back to our divisions? And then maybe depending on that, we can bring Justina and Josh back, maybe if not next time, the time after, see where we are. We can touch base. Yes,
And Melanie, just so Josh and I are clear, are you asking us formally to go back to our committee to talk about this?
I am formally asking you, as the academic senate president of Santa Barbara City College, I'm formally asking you guys to go back to your committees, see, tell them about this, see what they think. And I think the driving question is, how do we improve our teaching to serve our students? What do we do with questions of pedagogy?
Just a little thing.
Yeah, small thing, you know? Okay, all right, are we good on that, everyone? Good on that, except for Chris?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I guess I'll state it aloud, if the CFR's purpose, as it was intended has changed, and if we should go back then, rather than create a new committee, go back to the committee on teaching and learning that exists before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what CFR's up to these days, I guess.
As long as we just don't do the same thing we've always done.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm CTO. I was the chair of CTO. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. The great.
I promised to do some research and talk to the people that were on that, like really kind of dig into this and Ellen's point too of, like, we can't keep these things separate. So does that mean a committee on teaching and learning that brings in COI and CFR, which would be more efficient in many ways. So we'll do some research.
Okay. Thank you, Justina and Josh. Another Senate meeting. For roles, thank you guys. So lucky. Okay, all right. Well, the good news is we're back. Speaking of murky, can I have the hand gesture? There we go, right?
We need
My
to
jazz hands. My jazz hands. No, these are jazz hands. This is murky. All right, let's turn to the questions of, and Josh, feel free to leave if you so wish. And Justina, obviously, who's already packing up to get the hell out of here.
She's running away as quickly as she can.
She's got work to do. She's got research for us. She does have work to do. Okay, so this brings us to the discussion of academic freedom and equity. The goal is to debrief the feedback that you've received from your divisions, discuss the issues that were raised, and begin to craft the definition of academic freedom. Even I, in my most optimistic phase, know that we cannot do this in 15 minutes. I'm clear about that. But yeah, but let's debrief and see what you guys found out from your divisions.
Well, I have a definition of academic freedom that I wanted to share, and now I cannot find it. And so I will put it in the notes, but I think it was kind of better than the one from, what was it, Orange Coast, or wherever that was.
Golden West.
Golden West,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where
So
did
I will
you-
give that.
Where did you find that, or did you guys create
It
it?
comes from the UCSB art department, but it's generic enough that it really, I think, was eloquently stated. So I really apologize that it's here for me, but I will get it soon.
That's great. Okay, thank you. So we have one suggestion from the UCSB art department. Okay. Any debrief from your departments?
we're meeting Friday to discuss this in person in our departments. We haven't had a department meeting since the last Senate meeting, but I did send this around over email. I got one response. I didn't expect a whole lot. We're just busy right now. It's hard. So I'm glad we're going to talk about the whole new committee on top of this in the next couple of weeks. But just to tag on what you said, Joy, I did have this one faculty member say that she didn't think that definition that was offered from Golden West accomplishes much. For her, she had questions about what's meant by professional standards in that definition. She said that we are clearly not in today's climate trusted educational professionals, and that academic freedom is defined there as a method of instruction. I think the quote was most effective way to instruct. She had concerns about that, if that's really what we mean by academic freedom.
And go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
I think that the Golden West definition, this is why we did that work on those two presentations in the last two Senate meetings, that definition owes a lot to that 1940 AAUP definition that we've come back to, that sort of, is sort of the DNA for a lot of these. So an interesting point. Did any of you get that feedback that we are not seen as trusted professionals anymore? Anyone else get that?
Maybe I got from one faculty, maybe a little tone of that there need to be guidelines out there. And for myself, being in art history and then reading the article about the art historian, I'm really wanting protections. And I shared this question earlier. Like, if I show something that is already in a textbook about images of gender fluidity or something, do I have any protection from that if I'm using a state sanctioned textbook? I don't understand if someone can challenge anything that I show. You could get uncomfortable about just about everything these days.
And when you say anyone can challenge, do you mean literally anyone, or do you mean students in
A
particular?
student, yeah.
Jess?
Hi, yes. We did get feedback just from a select few. They kind of liked the Golden West College statement. Where it would live was up for discussion. It was a general consensus that we go through a pretty rigorous hiring process. So that process should be trusted, that the people that are choosing that the one to get the job are the best. Sorry, my daughter's 1 second. Sorry. What was I saying? Basically, we should be trusted as the experts, the content experts, because we have the degree. We also have the teaching experience, and hopefully we're the ones doing the research on how to best present this information and what information what information needs to be given. There was also, it seemed like there were a few mentions of, I guess to go to your question, Melanie, of are we no longer viewed as the content experts? There was a few mentions of the administration kind of imposing maybe a little too much in certain aspects, and then also not some faculty didn't feel supported by administration in one way or another. So the question, like, do you see the links between the articles and SBCC? I mean, they just felt like we aren't really being supported in some way or another. So yes.
Is he speaking about here or in the article?
You're saying that faculty here in your, in your division felt that they recognized themselves in those two articles as vulnerable and not supported by administration.
Yeah, and they're really like the idea of making us making something happen to like provide that security for full-time faculty, but especially non-tenured faculty, because their job security isn't really there.
Yeah, and did that extend to part-time too, Jess?
Sorry, yes, I said non-tenured, but yes, that's what I meant also.
Okay, okay, great. Anyone else? Any other reactions? Trisha.
Yes, sorry, I didn't, sorry, I muted, which is almost like raising your hand. I didn't get any response back, and I'm kind of wondering, it was a lot to read, you know, and it was a short period of time I gave people, so I might want to re-ask it in a different way. But so just for my own personal ideas would be, I feel like the landscape's changing, you know, things that we wouldn't have thought about a few years ago that could be controversial. Like talking, you know, using certain words like, you know, Latinx or something, you know, in our that are now, from what I've heard, banned in certain states or something, or discouraged. So, you know, this landscape's changing, and I wonder if this ties into what we were just talking about the teaching committee too. You know, where if I'm not sure about something, like I'm going to address something controversial in my class, or is this controversial? You know, where could I run this by somebody to get sort of some suggestions about doing things that one faculty member did that wasn't effective, you know, like warning students ahead of time about something, or what if I do get, you know, either from students or from, you know, if it's recorded or other people are, you know, reading the syllabus. I remember Ellen and Tara's examples, you know, the community just kind of saying, oh, she's talking about this. So, you know, where would we go on campus if we're not sure? I guess our deans maybe, but or is there some place that's more of a resource to talk about our concerns prior to presenting, to talk about what do we do if somebody does react? And then also, yeah, what are our protections if, you know, if somebody does accuse us of something? And I mean, this is completely different subject, but it reminds me a little bit when we were talking about the fraternization, you know, like how if somebody accuses you of something, there's a committee that's going to look at it. You know, was this really out of line? You know, Trisha, were you teaching something that was completely out of what you should have been teaching? And so maybe does deserve maybe a little reprimand, or was it, no, you were in line? So I guess that either clarifying the support or building it.
Yeah, it's really interesting thought that's maybe even something that could go into or be a topic that's dealt with by a teaching committee. Really practical. So we would have the broad sweeps, definitions, and then we could have a really practical place for people to go. And I'm also thinking about Anna's point from last time. What about people who aren't in the classroom, but people still interacting with students? So maybe we could also have a kind of special, if we're talking about dealing with students, maybe we could have something for ESD for different groups on campus, to help people manage those kinds of questions.
We need a help desk.
Okay.
Academic freedom help desk.
Academic freedom help desk. But you know what? We're gonna go to Rachel Johnson, who's handing out money, and we're gonna get ourselves one of those. Okay. Really interesting, you guys. Anyone else? Juan, you're looking really thoughtful over there, or are you just looking really thoughtful?
No, I sent this to my department, didn't have any comments, but you know, it's kind of troubling. What if I'm teaching a topic, you know, whatever the topic is, I don't think it's controversial, you know, and therefore I don't check with that committee or with that administrator, whether it be my chair, my dean, and suddenly it becomes controversial. You know, even though we have a definition and we have I guess, categories or litmus paper, I don't know what to call it, you know, but some type of criteria that we look at and say, okay, I'm gonna look at my topic. What am I going to be teaching? Does it fit that criteria? Oh, controversial. I go to the committee. But what if it doesn't? I mean, I go there. You know, what are the consequences? I'm gonna be accused of X thing. I don't know. That's why I believe this committee that is going to be on teaching. I also agree, there shouldn't be a new committee. There should be an evolution of a committee that we have. And maybe all these responsibilities that are seen separate could collide or won't be murky in that particular committee. I believe that we should consolidate because we're evolving. And if we are evolving, then the issues, the responsibilities that these committees have to address, well, need to evolve. Instead of creating a new committee, a committee has to evolve, or committees have to evolve where this responsibility is enforced. But I will have feedback from my department, hopefully in the next Senate meeting.
So one of the things that the 1940 AAUP definition gives us is this idea of us as experts, that we have higher degrees, that those degrees have been vetted by institutions. We all know what it took to get those degrees, right? So we know the process that we went through. The AAUP definition is assuming that that is a litmus standard. I think interesting that Jeff, your division came back with, we know what the hiring process is like, right? From the get-go, right? Like who gets to have a hire, who's on the hiring committee and so on. We know what that's like. Do other people feel like, and so in 1940, right? 1940, this seems like a good enough key thing to say. You're experts, and so your expertise is revered, accepted, and looked up to. Obviously, part of what we're living through, part of this issue now, is the consequence of a kind of, I mean, in its ideal, it was a democratization of knowledge. I think now it's become something else with the internet. So do you guys feel that this is a key element, this question of us as experts in the field? Is that still relevant? Because I'm also hearing this question of protection, and it's not either or. I'm just wondering. Ellen.
I know we're running low on time, so I'll try to be succinct. I had two things I wanted to say. One is, I understand the reasons why we might want to shy away from addressing things that could be perceived as controversial because of the repercussions that so many are experiencing in so many educational settings in this country when we do that. But I also think we need to resist that. Certainly as a social scientist, that's been like addressing controversial issues in critical ways is what I do, and so I don't want to sanitize or whatever, I don't even know the right word, like my I don't want to pretend that the issues I'm addressing are neutral when they're not, when they're happening in within systems of oppression and stuff like that. And also to that point, part of what I teach as a librarian is the ways that notions of authority have been steeped in white supremacist institutions and structures, and that marginalized voices have been excluded from things like academic publishing and even getting jobs like ours in the first place and stuff like that. So I think that's part of what we need to look at with this, because that's something I'm challenging, like those power structures in what I'm teaching. But I'm also an expert, but I'm an expert because of a whole bunch of different things, including the degree that an institution gave me because I jumped through the right hoops in an educational system that's based in settler colonialism and all. It's complicated, right? So and it's something I deal with a lot in what I teach. Like, how do we challenge notions of authority without veering into, oh, so everyone is equally an authority on everything because these systems are problematic. But I don't have an answer, but I don't think that the fallback should be, we are institutions because, or we are experts because an institution gave me a PhD. Like, I think we need to look at it in a more critical way that examines the problems of our institutions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put, thank you. All right, you get the last word for the over by 30 seconds.
Actually, I don't want to go over time, but I know this is a topic that we're going to continue, so I'll give my comments next time.
Well, thank you to the noble few who stayed. We're up 2 pages. Now we're down to like less than 1 page and the room. So thank you guys so much. I am adjourning the meeting at 5:01. Great discussion. If you have any ideas, just write them down. Let's bring them back. And I'm going to send you guys something. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you were waving. Okay.